Well, Election Day in the United States is different than in many other nations because there is not a single national vote. Instead, each state runs its own election day by its own rules. And while most Americans are voting on November 8th, the selection of the next president is actually done by a group of individuals making up the Electoral College. VOA'S senior analyst Jeffrey Young explains.
Early voting in some U.S. states has begun. This year, Election Day is officially November 8th. In each of the 50 states and in the District of Columbia, there are political offices to fill, ballot questions to resolve, and just like 4 years ago, the choice to make of whom to send to the White House. The United States Constitution is filled with rights and protections for citizens, but voting is not necessarily one of them. As Georgetown University professor Mark Rome points out,
one would think that the right to vote is just as much an essential right of citizenship as the ability to speak freely or to worship freely, to petition the government and so forth. But it's not. The voting requirements are typically established by the states, and the states more or less can use their own standards.
The minimum voting age of 18 is set by U.S. federal law, but Rome says otherwise there is very little uniformity.
And so there is a patchwork of 50 different states with 50 different state laws about the time for voting, the processes for registering to vote, the places where you can vote, how you can vote by absentee ballot. All those details of the elections are established by state law, not by federal law.
The absentee ballots that Rome refers to are used by people who are away from home on Election Day, in the military, for instance, or traveling, or away at school. In recent years, something called early voting has also developed. Some 2/3 of the states now allow people to cast their ballots as much as a month or more before the official Election Day in November. A number of states have also passed laws requiring voters to produce specific photo IDs at their polling place to prove their identities. Advocates of these laws say they are necessary to prevent fraud. Opponents say such fraud is too statistically small to be a problem and charge the laws are meant to suppress voting. And there's another way that a U.S. presidential election is really some 50 separate contests. According to the Constitution, people voting for president are actually selecting 538 people called electors on a state-by-state basis. And it's these people who officially determine who becomes president. American University professor Curtis Gans.
Those electors are in number the congressional delegation in each state, 2 for the Senate and however many representatives, and they are elected by winner-take-all vote in the states.
George Mason University professor Dennis Johnson.
The most important number is 270, and that's the number of electors that will get you over the top. And any combination of states that has 270, that's the magic number that you're really looking for.
And while most presidential elections have one candidate winning both the majority of the popular vote and the Electoral College, an exception took place in 2000. Democrat Al Gore won the national popular vote by more than 500,000 ballots and had clear control of 266 Electoral College votes. But his challenger, Republican George W. Bush, led by a tiny fraction in the state of Florida. Gore demanded a partial recount, which Bush challenged all the way to the Supreme Court. More than a month after the election, the court sided with Bush, effectively awarding him Florida's 25 electoral votes and the White House. Johnson says the Electoral College is why candidates spend most of their time in a handful of so-called battleground states, the ones they believe will give them that winning total of 270 electoral votes. Jeffrey Young, VOA News.